The silent thank you. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Riverside Bistro, casting golden stripes across the polished wooden floors. It was the kind of place where soft piano music drifted through the air, where conversations hummed like gentle waves, and where every table setting gleamed with careful attention. Sarah Mitchell moved between the tables with practiced grace, her blonde ponytail swaying as she balanced a tray of drinks. She had been working at the bistro for 3 years now, ever since she graduated from college. The job paid her bills, but more than that, it gave her something she treasured, moments of connection with people from all walks of life. Today had been steady but unremarkable. Businessmen hunched over laptops, elderly couples shared quiet meals. Tourists snapped photos of their desserts. Sarah served them all with the same warm smile, the same attentive care. Then they walked in. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, skipped through the entrance holding the hand of a man in an impeccably tailored gray suit. The child wore a pink dress that seemed to float around her as she moved, and her strawberry blonde hair caught the afternoon light. Her face radiated pure joy, the kind of happiness that made everyone around her smile without knowing why. The man beside her carried himself with quiet authority. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his watch probably cost more than Sarah's car. But what struck Sarah most was the gentle way he guided the little girl, his hand protectively resting on her shoulder as they approached their table. Sarah grabbed 2 menus and walked over, her server's smile already in place. "Good afternoon," she said brightly. "Welcome to Riverside Bistro." The man nodded politely, but it was the little girl who captured Sarah's attention. The child was staring up at her with wide, curious eyes, her small hands moving in deliberate patterns through the air. Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment. She recognized those movements. Sign language. The little girl's hands formed shapes and gestures that Sarah didn't understand, but the meaning behind them was clear. The child was trying to communicate. "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly, glancing at the man. "I don't know sign language." "Is she deaf?" the man confirmed, his voice low and measured. "Yes, her name is Emma." He paused, and something softened in his expression. "And she's very excited to be here. This is her first time at a fancy restaurant." Sarah's heart squeezed. She crouched down to Emma's level, making sure the little girl could see her face clearly. She pointed to herself and mouthed her name slowly, "Sarah." Emma's face lit up like a sunrise. She pointed to herself and then fingerspelled something Sarah couldn't follow, but she nodded enthusiastically anyway. "It's wonderful to meet you, Emma," Sarah said, speaking clearly and making sure Emma could see her lips. The man, who introduced himself as Marcus Wellington, ordered for both of them. Throughout the meal, Sarah found herself drawn back to their table more than necessary. She watched as Marcus cut Emma's food into small pieces, as he wiped her chin with gentle patience, as he signed to her between bites. There was such tenderness in his movements, such obvious devotion. When Sarah brought dessert, a chocolate cake that made Emma's eyes grow impossibly wide, the little girl bounced in her seat with delight. She attacked the cake with the enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster, chocolate frosting soon decorating her cheeks. As the meal wound down, Sarah approached with the check, setting it discreetly beside Marcus's coffee. She began clearing their plates, stacking them carefully on her tray. That's when Emma reached out and tapped Sarah's arm. Sarah turned, and her breath caught. The little girl's small hands moved with careful precision. Her right hand formed a flat shape at her chin, then moved forward and down toward Sarah. The gesture was simple, clear, unmistakable. "Thank you." Emma was signing, "Thank you," to her. Sarah felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She set down her tray and, without thinking, her own hands moved in response. Thumb extended, she touched her fingertips to her lips, then moved her hand forward toward Emma, mirroring the gesture she'd just received. "You're welcome." The little girl's face transformed into pure radiance. She bounced in her seat, signing rapidly to Marcus, who had gone completely still. When Sarah looked up, she found Marcus staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, but something else too, something deeper. "Where did you learn that?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah straightened, suddenly self-conscious. "Oh, I took a class 2 years ago." She glanced down at her hands. "My sister had a baby, and there was a possibility he might be deaf. We wanted to be prepared. He ended up being fine, but I fell in love with ASL. I'm not fluent or anything. I only know basic signs, really. Enough to order coffee or say hello." She laughed nervously. "I'm pretty rusty now." Marcus continued to stare at her, and Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. That's extraordinarily kind. Most people don't bother to learn even a single sign. Sarah shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. It seemed important. Communication matters. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. He pulled out his wallet, but instead of just leaving payment, he withdrew a business card and wrote something on the back. I run a foundation, he explained, sliding the card across the table. The Wellington Foundation. We fund educational programs and accessibility initiatives. One of our newest projects is a restaurant training program, teaching food service workers basic ASL so deaf customers feel more welcome. He met her eyes. We've been struggling to find the right person to help develop the curriculum. Someone who understands both hospitality and the deaf community. Someone who genuinely cares. Sarah picked up the card, her heart beginning to pound. I know this is unexpected, Marcus continued, but would you consider meeting with us? You have exactly the perspective we need. And, he glanced at Emma, who was watching them both intently. Emma doesn't usually warm up to strangers. But she knew you were different. She felt it. Sarah looked at the little girl, at those bright, intelligent eyes. She thought about the months she'd spent learning sign language, thinking it would never really matter. She thought about all the times she'd served customers who felt invisible, unheard. I'd love to, she said quietly. Emma clapped her hands together, and Sarah laughed, the sound breaking the tension. She signed, "Thank you," again to the little girl, and Emma responded with enthusiastic gestures that Sarah only partially understood but that clearly meant, "See you soon." As Marcus and Emma left the restaurant, Marcus paused at the door and looked back. Sarah was already serving another table, but she caught his glance and smiled. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the smallest gestures carried the biggest meanings. A simple sign, two small words, "Thank you," and sometimes, they changed everything.